Right, councillors, welcome back, and thanks for sharing the wonderful morning tea, as we always do, and with our community. Councillors, I will offer, going back to our business paper, that... Oh, sorry, can I have a motion to resume standing orders? Councillor Sawyer, I thank you, and Councillor Murray, I thank you for being the seconder. All in favour? Again, carried. Councillors, I will offer to the council to move an item forward. We have an item on page 89 to do with the notice motion from Councillor Bauman-Petrie, if we wish to deal with it. Now, I do want to note that with the relationship that we do have with our community, and I argue every day, and it was made, I don't ever look back, I don't give you a crook neck about our toxic relationship. We have a good relationship with our community, and I want to note that here today. We have Mrs Butler, who done a wonderful presentation this morning to do with this in this area, so I think it's appropriate while Tracy's still here that we deal with this item now, and I hope you're all in support of that. So, Councillor, can I have a motion to move this item forward, please? Councillor Verley is mover, and Councillor Tom Peters is seconder. All in favour? Right. Councillor Roman, being the author of the notice of motion, you happy to move that way?
Yes.
Got a seconder, please. Councillor Sawyer, thank you.
Oh.
And I'll hand over to you, Councillor Bauman.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Well, the recommendation is to review the existing buy local policy with the view to increasing the current local price advantage from 5% in order to support our local businesses, our local employment and our local community. Not a decision today on whether it moves or not, but to get the report to the December Ordinary Council meeting. Our Chief Financial Officer, Paul, has already been doing work in this sphere. It is really important because, as we heard from Mrs Butler, as I said, they've trained 8 Boilermakers, 7 of which are still here, have houses, families, kids, etc. They support, and they're not alone, so this isn't just about DTB Fabrications. We have a lot of suppliers to council who are missing out on not necessarily great big jobs, but you know, the small jobs do add up, and in the case of DTB Fabrications, obviously they are competitive because we know that the team from here are going even into Victoria doing jobs, so they're clearly competitive and do work, as do many of our other suppliers. If you look at the Ballina local supplier consideration, theirs is a very interesting policy, and it says, council policy is to support local suppliers where we consider the benefits of that support to our local economy outweigh any additional costs incurred in the procurement of the goods and services. To support the local economy, council will include in any formal quotation and tender process an evaluation criterion referred to as social and community that identifies attributes that reflect the supplier's presence and economic contribution to the Ballina Shire. And they also, in Ballina, they try to, providing it's a competitive quote and providing it's of the right type of work, quality of course, do local, and if they can't get it locally, they then go to the neighbouring shires. If they can't get it from the neighbouring shires, they then go to the neighbouring region before they look elsewhere, which is really interesting. But the attributes included in the criteria will include but not be limited to knowledge and experience with the local conditions, whether the supplier is locally based business and whether or not they've worked locally, social impact on the local economy, local jobs created, maintained or lost, which is really important, level of local and Australian content, where the products and materials are sourced locally, and alignment with Council's community strategic plan. So their weighting is a minimum 15% with higher weightings allowed where there's considered to be potential for a significant impact on the local economy through a council procurement decision, particularly on local employment and keeping the money circulating within the town, as our Chief Executive referred to before with regard to our fees and charges. So I think it's something we definitely need to look at. Glen Innes is 10%, Ballina is a minimum of 15 and could go higher. So I think it's a timely motion to have, particularly in light of the work that Mr Dell has already been doing in this space. And we really do need to, irrespective of drought or not, we need to support our local businesses where they're providing quality goods or competitive pricing, and if they're just missing out by time, like 1 or 2%, you know, whatever it happens to be, it's unfortunate that the money's then leaving our district. We do, of course, have to be mindful of our budgets, but at the same time, you look at things such as, say, air conditioners. If you buy them locally, you can get them serviced immediately. If you buy them away, you might have to wait weeks or whatever to get that backup service. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bronwyn. Councillor Sawyer being the second, I'll go to you, but I just need to comment, Councillor Bronwyn, and it always concerns me, and happy to have the conversation, not argument, because I don't think we argue. We have wonderful conversations. It always concerns me in reports when there's a comparison with a bigger shire, and obviously, and I'm sharing this with the whole council, obviously a bigger rate base, and I'm just interested how that all works out, because obviously they've got more fat in the fire to play with there. So I'm just noting that, and I'm referring to Ballina. So it's not I'm not being critical. I'm just always concerned when we look at a bigger shire, where I'd look at Kyogle or Glen Innes being very similar, or Uralla, very similar population and area that we have. But no. You can come back to me with your comments. You build the argument to what I just said. I'll give you a bit. Councillor Sawyer.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. It's a very easy recommendation to second. It's a very clear comment that we are getting more information back to us at the next meeting so that we can make a considered decision. We need more businesses in town, not less, and we need more ratepayers, not less. So we'll have a discussion based on relevant material at the next meeting.
Robust, Councillor.
No, we'll save that for the budget.
Councillor Berry, I'll go to you.
Thanks, Mr Mayor, through you. I've always supported this buy local thing. Even when I was the director on the PP board, I brought up the fact that we should have a buy local 10% at least. I was put in my place there because the argument was there, and as it was on council a few years ago, that if you buy something at a 10% discount locally, you're putting it back on the ratepayers. And my argument was, of course, same as Bronwyn, Councillor Petrie's, and that you are supporting business. And that's been my argument all the time for supporting this type of motion. And I think we looked at it quite a few years ago when we did this policy.
I think
and
so.
I think the argument then was we couldn't afford it. I don't know why we couldn't afford it, because I mean it comes back to you in the long run.
Yep. Thank you, Councillor. Any more questions to the report, councillors? We'll get closing, Councillor. I'll come to you, Councillor. None? Okay. Councillor Bronwyn, I'll go to you for closing comment.
Thanks, Mr Mayor, and I think the issue here is we can't afford not to do it. So, because we need to have business, we need to have industry, and we need their staff. Otherwise, we don't have any ratepayers.
Yep.
So, if you look at the motion, I haven't stipulated a percentage.
No, I note
I've
that.
just said it's with a view to increasing from 5. So, Glen Innes, the example there is 10, Ballina's minimum 15, I forget what Clarence Valley is, but it's a starting point to look at where we might end up.
Yep.
But I certainly think that in order to maintain, not only just maintain existing jobs,
Yep.
but to also encourage industry here, and by the same token, we don't want any local weighting abused either. I mean, we always try to buy locally, but if you can get something for half the price elsewhere, then of course you're going to. But you know, I think we really do need to support our local businesses and our local families. And with the examples Mrs. Butler gave, 7 out of the 8, just the Boilermakers that they've trained, live locally, have built houses, etc.
Yep.
So it all adds up, and the more industry and business that we've got, the better our ratepayer base will be.
Yep. Thank you, Councillor. I apologise, it was closing comment, but I apologise to SC, he did have some comment.
Through Mr Mayor, I'll put it over to our Chief Corporate Officer to make a comment about the timing.
It's just a comment, and I agree and happy to respond to Council's request. The challenge with the timing, we've got a couple of other processes in trained that are meeting on this, which we've just recently, as last week, had our internal auditors on site reviewing the procurement policy of council in its entirety based on the presentation you would have seen from the audit office this morning, trying to get a little bit in front of that. We've got those reviews, I guess, coming. On the one hand, and on the other hand, it is a reasonably complicated discussion with all of those levers to be had, so I would request if council could consider perhaps delaying that report until sort of February or March, just to give us the time to get the internal audit responses back, because they'll be looking at a lot of our processes and policies and what that may mean. I understand too from a business perspective that there will be probably some concern about delaying that, about the procurement that we may have in the meantime, where people might perceive that they would miss out. I'll defer it to Fiona, but I know certainly for a lot of the grant programs, etc., that we've gotten the delivery timeframes, that there won't be a lot of impact because most of our procurement has actually occurred for that, to try and get those projects finished by the end of the year. Also too, from an administrative perspective versus the council policy setting, do take on Mrs Butler's comments about going out and seeking quantity survey and the like, and some of the challenges that we've had with that in terms of the timing of some of the monies that we're actually trying to roll out from council at this point in time, and having an understanding of whether the budget will fit the project.
Councillors, before I go to you, yeah, well, happy to respond, Councillor, because with our senior staff members' comments there, we need to be supportive of our senior staff, and I think, Kylie, you've explained that really well. So I'd ask, Councillor, for your view as a mover and of the notice of motion, you have got it in there at December, and when you take on board maybe a little bit bigger time frame to work with our staff?
Well, I did speak to Mr Della prior to putting the motion in. February, not March. I'll go.
Yeah, happy with that?
If it's council's resolution, I will resource to make that happen, but once again, as we always talk about the timing and the expediency, we'll find somebody to do.
So do we need to have a word change in there? Yep, first meeting in 2020? Yep. So I don't think, happy that we don't, and do we need an amendment there? We just all agree there? Okay, all good. Right, councillors, thank you, and Kylie, thank you for your comments. The recommendations there, councillors, all in support of the recommendation? Against? Carried. Thank you. Councillors, we'll go back to, correct me if I'm wrong, to page 31, our hard copy, item COM 18/0.
May I be excused for 10 minutes? I've just got to get a key to a dozer.
Only for you, councillor.
A dozer man.
Only for you.
And look, thanks to the staff for making those small amendments to the footpath things. It made it better. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, page 31, it's item COM 18/19, amendment to draft new footpath activities, policy number 1.065. Can I move in a second to deal with this, please? Councillor Verry, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Rogan, and I thank you. And I'll hand over to our Manager of Open Space and Regulatory Utilities. Is that you, Col?
Today I have borne that hat. I'm
Good.
also going to be the manager of public facilities later on. At this time of the year we do get a little bit short, and as you know we've had quite a few impacts on the community at the moment, so most of my staff, with the exception of course of Paul and Erica, have done a fabulous job, both in terms of getting the reports together. We'll present theirs, but the other guys will not today. We've got an officer's recommendation here. We put out the new footpath activities policy. Council will remember that one of our impetuses for reviewing this was to try and aggregate our policies into a more streamlined approach. So one, where previously there were two, to provide some clear guidance to those people who were seeking to undertake footpath activities, and also to streamline our approach in the new year with a view to actually putting in place a one fee structure instead of multiple fee structure for those particular policy approvals. So we've been out on exhibition. We've actually received no submissions from the community. However, we did have some conversations about changes that could make that clearer in our previous council report, so we've incorporated those, and as I said, the officer's recommendation is there that we dropped the draft new footpath activities approvals policy that has been out on exhibition as per the attachment, adopts the previously approved local approvals policy as no submissions were received, and repeals that street vending policy and advertising sandwich boards policy upon adoption of the new policies.
Any questions to Kylie to do with the report, councillors? No questions. The officer's recommendation. I'm sorry, Councillor McNish.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Just one, Kylie. I notice there's no provision there for, I suppose, Jehovah's Witnesses or other religious groups. Is there, what's the policy there?
The policy is a little bit more based on the activity as opposed to the applicant. So at this point in time, that policy provides for the types of activities that people undertake, and anybody, of course, can make an application for those.
They've got a busking permit.
Okay. Officers, any more questions, councillor, to the senior staff? Officers' recommendations there, councillors, all in favour? Against? Carried? And we do note that councillor Bromwell is out of the room, but she can't do a proxy, so just note that she is out of the room. Okay. Apologise. Councillors, page 44. It's item COM 19/19, National Parks and Wildlife Land Acquisition. Councillors, can I have a move and a second there to do with this item? Councillor Sawyer, I thank you. Second by Councillor Murray, and I thank you. And I'll hand over to Kylie to present this report.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. We received a letter of request there from the Honourable Matt Keane, which is attached to this particular report, and obviously believed that it was very important that Council be involved in that decision on the response back to Mr Keenan. We've got a officer's recommendation based on our review of the land that Council does have access to at this point in time. That Council has not identified any suitable Council-owned land for acquisition by National Parks, so we don't believe that there's anything to transfer. Also, we believe from some of the conversations that Council has had that the Mayor may wish to reply expressing Council's concerns with the current management and staffing levels of National Parks and Wildlife Service across the state and in Tenterfield's local government area in particular. So maybe the Mayor might like to provide some commentary on that as well for your consideration.
Well, thank you, Kylie. I just, with the couple of workshops I've had, I want to thank the councillors for their support and everything we've been doing along these lines. And one thing I want to make clear, when the letter is drafted to the Honourable Minister, that we are, don't shift off the mark where we've been for some time now. Fully support our national parks and our wonderful area that we have in our LGA, but they need to be managed better than what they are, and that's not a derogatory comment against the current staff. We're asking that they get the sufficient staff to manage those areas in the way they are. I need to share with the council that we all need to be aware that private holdings, they can negotiate with the government to sell their country, so that's nothing to do with us, so we all need to be aware of that. That has been done in this area over many, many years, so that's out of our hands, but we're talking about council-owned land. So we are, and it's just something that I need to be solid on, and I thank Councillor Very a couple of weeks ago for supplying me some information. I really appreciate that, Councillor, and I will be using that in the reply to the Minister. Any other questions, councillors, to do with this report? Well, I'll go to you, Councillor Murray, first. You had a question, Councillor?
Yeah, just...
I'm going to Councillor Murray first.
Oh,
thank you. Yeah.
Through you, Mr Mayor.
Yep.
This comes under the banner of horse trading. Can we have a conversation with them concerning they pay rates, we give them something in return?
That's another argument to take forward, Councillor.
But it's under the banner of horse trading.
Yeah. Well, I'll go back to a group that's been formed out of the Country Mayors Organisation, which have been dealing over a number of years now with the National Parks and Forestry Corp,
Right.
for them to pay rates on what they use, and it's a big one to challenge. But I mean, it's got full support of the Country Mayors Association to go down that road, and we're still battling. We've had a little bit of a win with the Forestry Corp. Whether they are, because the Forestry Corp, I need to share with the council, they are a profitable organisation. State government owns them. I think last year they had a profit of $60 million, and our manager of engineering department's here at the moment, and what's going to happen up in our northern end of the Shire. And I fully support Fiona and her questions and concerns of logging that area with no concern of making a contribution towards maintaining that road area. And this is something that we need to do as a council. It's not hard, and just have that conversation that you need to contribute, and makes it better for everyone. Makes it better for people that are living there, makes it better for that organisation that's doing the logging. Fully support the hardwood logging. I've got no issues with that. But you know, we're the ones at the end of the day, at council, whatever local government area, we've got to cop it and fix that road after they're finished. Am I correct in saying that, Fiona? So fully support, and I commend Fiona for her had a conversation while we wait the roads conference about this very topic. So, Brian, I'm a bit all over the place, but that's basically what you're saying. But there is plenty of work all over the number of years pursuing national parks and Forestry Corp, because as our Councillor Bromwell always refers to, as over 30% of this shire is unrateable because that's what those areas are. Councillor Verry.
Just a couple of comments, Mr Mayor.
Take the comments, Councillor.
Thank you. With the national parks, one thing I would like to see, and I think it probably requires separate motion, as from your letter to them, would be have the national parks in the shire all combined under one banner, rather than you got the Northern Tablelands that goes as far as Maryland and all the others are on the coast. We should have a head office of national parks for this area in this shire. I think that would require a separate motion to write to the National Parks Minister.
Happy for you to bring that motion to Council.
Yeah, I may do that too. And the other thing I think we should be asking him, if he does buy private land, is a two for one ratio. If he buys 1 hectare, that two hectares are released from Crown land back to the Shire, so we get that ratio back to, I think it was 16% initially, and then we're up to 34%, as Councillor Petrie always says.
Yep.
So, yeah, and the other thing, if they're buying something in the Shire, it should be woodland. That's where most of our endangered species are. That's where most of our birds have disappeared from. This Shire was never ever scrubbed like it is at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, and I share with our councillors, we commend you on your passion for that, Councillor Verry. You've always been there, and I fully support your comments. Okay, councillors, officers' recommendations there. All in favour of the recommendation? Against? Carried. Councillors, move to page 48. It's item COM 20/19, Crown Land proposed to close Crown Road within the Tulloom Falls Reserve. Can I have a move and a seconder for this one, please? Councillor Michael Petrie, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Bronwyn Petrie, and I thank you. And I hand over to our property specialist to present this report. Thanks, Cole.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. Many hats. Crown Land have actually sought Council's interest or objection into the closure of the Crown Road within the Tulloom Falls Reserve. There have been some conversations about this reserve previously, about trying to manage some of the detrimental environmental impacts within that particular reserve. This conversation is more about whether or not Council has any objections to closing the road, which you will see identified on page 51. Yep. Which does traverse through that particular reserve via the centre. So what we've got there as a recommendation is that we do actually oppose the closing of the Crown Reserve, which passes through on the basis that we require access to Tulloom Creek. So at the moment that's where we're accessing the creek. What we'd also provide, I guess, given those other considerations of some of the issues in the area, is that we've actually got no objection to the relocation of the Crown Road within the boundary to allow access to the Tulloom Creek, and request that the remaining portion of the Crown Road from the northeast boundary of the reserve to the Falls Road be dedicated to Council as a public road, ensuring access to that reserve is maintained at this point in time. So you'll see a dotted line on that particular map. So we're proposing to take the small shaded or take over the small shaded section to the north of the reserve, just to ensure that we do actually have access via a public road to the reserve, and then propose the request, whilst we've opposed the closing of that road, that we would essentially be open to moving that to the northern boundary, which may meet some of the needs of the reserve owners.
Thank you, Colin. Councillors, we have workshopped this, and I commend Jen and Colin and that team that Heidi and Jen done the work on this, and it was really appreciated because it helped Council in their knowledge of the issue we're dealing with, and it was presented really well. Councillors, any questions to Colin to do with the report? Councillor Michael?
Yeah, on that new proposed access, have they got a causeway or something to get across the creek there, or is it just come to a dead end? See, before they used to go across this road down here, the one they want to close to get across the river there over the paddocks there, there's a gate just across from there, but this new one just doesn't run into a big bluff or anything, so they can't get across.
I was going to say, my understanding, and Fiona can can dispel these myths. My understanding is that if we continued down to the western side, I assume, of that lot, then we would run into a problem with the terrain.
Yep.
However, that problem wouldn't be encountered on the northern side, but you probably have a better understanding of
The causeway that you're talking about isn't negotiable by vehicle. It's been partially dismantled.
Yep.
So there's no access as a through road. They have to come around the back of Needham's Creek, I
Yeah,
believe,
they
to
do.
get out
That's
of there.
exactly
Yeah.
right. Yeah, it has been for some time, councillor. There used to be a boom gate on it. And I think that's...
There's a great going across the river there.
Yeah, that causeway's there right on top of the falls. Yeah, exactly right. Any other questions to the staff, councillors, to do with the report? Reports there, councillors. All happy to receive the officer's recommendation. Favour? Against? Carried. Move on to page 52 in your hard copy, councillors, item ENV 25/19, provision of emergency waste vouchers. Can I have a move and a seconder for this item, please? Councillor Bronwyn Petrie, thank you. Seconder, please. Councillor Gary Varian, I thank you. I'll hand over to the Manager of Waste, Water and Waste. Gillian, welcome. You've been patiently sitting in the back bleachers. Just your microphone, please, Jill. Thank you. Now you're wired for sound.
Awesome. So we did discuss this in the workshop yesterday, and my recommendation is that we don't take any further action on delivering the vouchers. The reason for this is that you'll see that we've had quite a few fires in the areas. Public Works are the ones that can tell us exactly who's been affected by the fires, so we have lists of those. And as you can see, there's only 29 residents that have been identified in the September-October fires, but as you know, we've already had the November fires, which is the mapping that I've included in the report. Potentially, this could be 200 properties. The major issue that we will have is actually distribution of the vouchers, because a lot of the properties that were destroyed or damaged, we won't be able to find addresses for people to actually send vouchers to the people, because their postal addresses won't be current, and then I believe some people are living elsewhere as well. The other potential issue that we do have is that it will only be available to ratepayers rather than residents, which means that a lot of landowners might be getting the vouchers but not passing them on to their rental people. And it will cover all sorts of damage if we blanket. So it could be people who've lost stock or fences or some trees. So potentially there'll be quite a large area, and then we'll have to work out administratively how to identify burnt waste. So from that respect, it'll be quite difficult to manage. Yeah, that's pretty much it. If anyone's got any questions.
Gillian, what I'll do, I'll go to see he's got some comments to, and it just adds weight to the report.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I sent an email to Ross O'Shea from Office of Emergency Management this morning. We had a meeting yesterday or Monday afternoon. I think it was yesterday actually. The government is intending to amend the payments for waste to be received to councils, but they haven't supplied any councils the information yet. So on page 55, under legal and risk management, it says, lastly, the basis of all determining factors at the time of writing was very fluid at best, as all of the information and therefore our capacity to predict outcomes wasn't available. It still isn't available right now, but Ross O'Shea sent me an email back this morning saying it had the new, well, it's not really policy, the new instructions to local government have been written, but they haven't been approved and distributed yet. So we won't know until after the council meeting what the state government wants to do in relation to picking the tab up for those who are underinsured, as well as for those that the public PWA would be picking the tab up for anyway. So it would appear from our conversations with Ross O'Shea yesterday that the government has acknowledged that some people are underinsured, and that's putting pressures on those people. But they haven't come through with the exact details about what they're prepared to pay for councils about that as of right now, unless I've had an email in the last hour. But up until 9 o'clock this morning, I hadn't received anything. Thank you.
Questions to Gillian or say to do a report? Councillor Bronwyn, yes?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I raised this as an issue because when I was attending the Drake community meeting, it was asked there whether council would either not charge or do vouchers or something. Anyway, and at that time, Richmond Council had just announced that they're not charging any fees for burnt people till the end of the year. So it's not even limited to 3 trips or 1 trip, or as I said the last meeting, even 1 or 2 vouchers. It's not intended for people who've lost their entire houses and things, because those structures are being dealt with through the government and the EPA and all other things. Mostly it's for people who've got, it's been burnt all around their house or whatever's happened, and they've got more rubbish than they normally would have. And I think if we can't show some compassion, it's pretty miserable, especially when we've given up to $1,000 each for 2 sporting clubs, including green waste. When they're bush blocks, they could just leave it there anyhow. So, and they have a greater capacity to pay than individuals. So I just think to not show some support for our heavily impacted residents to the tune of even 1 voucher is horribly miserable, especially when you look at the next item of business, where it says, because in this one under for asset management, it says increases in waste volumes and temporary collection at Jennings provide wear and tear on council's waste fleet. And yet that comes up as neutral in the very next motion that refers to the Bryans Gap waste collection. So it must be different for each of the types of waste. The costing here is valued at $18.80 per voucher, not $13. So I'm not sure what the change is there. As for distribution, I presume the easiest way to distribute to Drake, or to make sure it actually goes to residents, is to do it with the assistance of the Drake Resource Centre there, who are handing out the water and everything else. And as for the ones around Tenterfield, we know there's 1 property involved in the Kildare fire. We know I've got the list of the people on the Scrub and Steinbrook, a lot of whom would not be wanting waste vouchers because of the type of damage they incurred. I mean, people aren't going to come and bring dead cows in, or, with stock fences, etc. We know they can get rid of steel, metals. Obviously, stock get buried on site. This is for the household type rubbish that people would normally be taking to the dump. So it's not new rubbish, it's stuff that would normally go, except this time it's actually been burnt. Anyway, I think if we don't support it, we're pretty miserable.
Noted, councillor. Any other comments to do with the report, councillors? The officer's recommendations there, councillors. All in favour? Against? You're noted, councillor?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Just note that Councillor Bronwyn-Petrie is voting against the officer's recommendation. Councillor McNish is voting against the officer's recommendation. Councillors, we move on to page...
Miserable.
Councillors, move on to page 57. Item ENV 26/19, Bryans Gap Waste Collection Survey. Can I move in a second to deal with this, please? Councillor Sawyer, thank you. Second, please. Councillor Rogan, and I thank you. And I'll hand over to Fiona. Melissa. Melissa. Technical Projects Engineer, to present this report. Welcome, Mel.
Mr Mayor?
Yes.
Do I stay?
Of course you can, because it's less than McCunry, Councillor.
Thank you.
We wouldn't do it without you in the room. No financial gain to you, councillor, is there? No, good. Welcome, Mel, over to you.
Thank you. So as you're aware, we had a request to look into a proposed waste collection service for the Bryans Gap Road. I believe that came from some residents making the request. So we put out a survey. We've learnt a lot from the Mount Lindsay service, so we just went to everyone. And they had the comment then to be able to come back and say it's not relevant to me, but everyone could have their voice heard. So response rates for any surveys, it's not too bad. We didn't get everyone, you never will. But we did get 63% responding, which I think is very positive. We did have 42% of people who would like a general waste collection service, and 47 people would also like a recycling service. Similar comments that we see from a lot of from the Mount Lindsay survey as well. A lot of reasons why people don't want the service is because it costs too much. They don't generate enough rubbish to feel they warrant the service. They just don't see the need. They're managing their waste efficiently currently, so they don't see a need to change. But then you have the new people. They might be people who've just moved to the area, or who might be ageing, or circumstances have changed, who feel that they would actually really benefit from this service. So really the decision is up to you guys on what we do. The operators can fit this into their operating schedule. The day that they can do is Friday. And then also the offering of the recycling service, that would be relevant to the eastern side, which is every second Monday. So the recommendations we've put forward is we can offer a mandatory service for both waste and recycling. We can offer an opt-in, opt-out service, as we have done for the Mount Lindsay, or we can offer not to offer any new services along that route. So if there's any questions.
Thank you, Mel. Before I go to questions then, Councillor Sawyer, your first cab off the rank. Councillors, it was something that I brought forward because I'd been approached, and I say that with respect to the two councillors who represent that area. I don't know why I was approached, but I need, the willingness is fairly rounded, because I think into the future, it's something that our community will see these requests come in, and only refer to, and I fully commend them. I reckon the development's been out there. It's only, Bryans Gap's like an industrial estate out there, housing estate, I'm sorry, and I commend everyone that wants to live out there on their few acres and have whatever, and I think we're going to see it into the future in many areas within that 5 to 10 kilometre radius of our town. And I don't refer to the highway, I do refer to Sunnyside. I've had the same requests from that area too. So it is a challenge that we need to face in the area into the future. I thank the staff for going to the trouble of doing the survey and in the report you've done, Mel, so thank you very much. Councillor Sawyer.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. To prove that we have heeded the learnings from the Mount Lindsay Road fiasco, disaster and all of the above, I'd like to move that the officer's recommendation 2 for the opt-in waste. So those that want it can have it, those that don't have to get involved. That's what I would like to move.
We have a seconder for that. Councillor Very, thank you. Councillor Sawyer, do you wish to take that because you know that, you wish to speak to that? Councillor Very?
No, I don't wish to speak to that, Mr Mayor, but I'd like to speak to the motion in general.
Yeah, take that.
Okay, I'd like to recommend in future that when you do these surveys, rather than do the survey at the beginning, you offer a free service for at least a minimum of 6 months, because it's always harder for people to get rid of a service rather than have a service. That's what I've discovered over.
Right, Councillor, so I want to make that, so we get that clear. So if we do this again, we're just going to offer a free bin service?
Just offer a free bin service
for 6 months?
For at least 6 months, a minimum of 6 months.
How we go?
No. Well,
I tell you what, Councillor, that's going to test their financial capabilities. And down Mackenzie too, I think.
That's up to... that would be up to a request from the public. Yeah.
Anyway, noted your comments, Councillor, but anyway, we'll look forward to that in the future. Councillor Bob Ryder.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd just like to maybe point out that given the amount of responses, and the percentage of those responses works out about, 8 or 9 residents or something actually want it. So personally, I would go for the officer's recommendation, point 3, and not offer it at this stage.
Well, councillor, I have got a recommendation up there, and we need to deal with that.
Yeah, well, that's
Okay, but happy to, if it doesn't get up, I'm happy to go back and deal with that. We don't want to confuse the issue. Okay, councillor, so councillor Sawyer in second, but, apologise, councillor? You want to make comment on the recommendation? Yep. Microphone? Yep.
Yes. I was wondering what the costing of the option 2 is, the opt-in, because it works out at, say, 12 people for, actually 12.6, which is interesting, people for the actual waste collection, and a couple more for the recycling. So I was wondering, what would the costing of an opt-in be? I do commend staff that all residents were contacted and given an opportunity, which was very good. It's nice to know that a lot of residents are managing their waste efficiently and don't see the need for it. Is there any potential, because more people were interested in recycling than the general waste, is there any potential to have like a recycling station out that way, so people aren't having to go to the...
In the way of a skip bin, councillor?
Yeah, for something, for whether it's glass or this, yeah, something, is that a different alternative we could have if the waste service doesn't come up? And I'm very interested in the costings, considering it's so, it's going to impoverish council to give a few vouchers to burnt people, but we can run an actual service for 10 people every week.
My view, councillor, I do take on your comments. My view is that, and we've seen it on the Mount Lindsay, that even the ones that didn't want a bin, I think as time's gone on, they've put their hand up for a bin. And I think that once they see that service out there, I mean, if it gets up, I think the same will happen. But that's just my view. And we will deal with the...
Is there a costing? So if we're going to make a decision...
No.
On...
Yep.
On the...
Apologise, councillor.
Yeah,
No.
because what is the opt-in costing?
It's hard to price an opt-in costing, because while people say now that they do want it, that can change. So we did cost the whole service, which is listed in the revenue. So it's just a proportion of that. So it depends also if they want a 240 or a 120 litre bin. We have different rates. So I think it's around $400 for a 240 litre bin. So you're saying about 12, so that's...
Well, then further, what would be the
Point of
flow-on
order,
cost?
Mayor.
Yep.
Cost.
We'll deal with it.
We've got a motion moved and seconded, and in the report it says under item 3, the increase in service will likely be cost neutral.
Well, if referring to the previous one, it said that there's wear and tear on the vehicles with additional waste. So how this is wear and tear, because it's not just additional waste that's already going to be delivered to a transfer station, you're going to go back and collect the stuff. So there is a costing here.
Councillor, I'm going to deal with the, take on board the point of order, and we do need to do it. I was just about to. So it's up there, councillors, that it's moved by Councillor Greg Sawyer and second by Councillor Very, that we offer an opt-in waste and recycling service along the proposed Bryants Gap Road route. All in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Against? Motion's up. Okay. Page 61, councillors, it's GOV 72/19, monthly operational report. Can I move to second to deal with this, please? Thanks, Mel. Could I have a motion to deal with this item, please, councillors? Councillor Raven, thank you. Second by Councillor McNish, I thank you. And I'll hand over to our CE to deal with the monthly operational report.
3, Mr Mayor, happy to take questions by exception.
Any questions to do with the monthly operation report? Councillor McNish. No, that's fine, Councillor. Just indicate your page so we can follow.
Page 62, 144.
Sorry. Microphone, please, Councillor. Page 64, Councillor.
Yep. 62, I think, Mr Mayor.
2.
Yep. It's just about, mainly about this bloody hell, hang on, this book here, and some of the responses I've had, one of the threats I see is deadlines for customer responses not met. Any request I put in, I don't know if other councillors use this much, but I use it fairly extensively. Any request for the engineering department normally comes back straight away. Jack Hooning gives me a ring and says, what do you think of this, or is that okay, or yeah, this is what you want. You know, I always get an acknowledgement that from an email that has been recorded and scanned, but I never hear of anything after that. There's a case in point, council resolved about 8 or 9 months ago to take over a footpath in Link Street, you may recall, and pay the money to the person whose land it was. She has heard nothing since then. I put a request in on the 14th of October saying she's heard nothing, and neither she nor the person who put it in has had a response as yet.
Right.
So there's been a bit of a breakdown there. And I was just wondering if the councillors who put these in might be able to get a note to say, yes, it's been actioned and this is what happened and all that sort of thing. I just sort of perhaps get the impression it might get into the system and just fall to the bottom of the barrel or something like that. There's another case there I spoke to Noel in about, was the application to see what Crown land there was in Drake, and that was probably 4 months ago, and I've still heard nothing there. As far as I know, the people at Drake with the men's shed haven't heard anything about that yet. So there seems to be a little communication breakdown somewhere there. I just wonder if the process could be tidied up a little bit.
Did you want to comment, Mr. C, or Kylie, or...?
I think what we're finding, councillor, and we've been talking a lot about this with individuals, is trying to tighten up the expectations of whom gets the response. So sometimes we receive, and that's being fairly clear, I suppose, as you say, on who gets a response. So most of the ones that we get are attributed to staff, and there are a variety of things that they need to look at. And also it's a perception or a reminder that we have had, you know, from that process of evaluating Crown land within Drake, we've had quite a good look at the Crown land in there, and we have responded, I believe, via telephone call. Now, what I'm hearing is that the expectation is that you will get something specific in writing addressed to those people, copied to others, and I think that's the conversation that we need to have about the type of, this is only my view, but the type of response that people want or are happy to receive. We're moving now more towards email, whereas once upon a time we used to mail every response. Now we're putting those responses in via email. Some of those records will actually be an email record. Some of those will be a record on letterhead. So perhaps that's something for the Manager of Customer Service and Records to have a little bit more of a conversation about those expectations, and are we meeting those and the protocols around them, if that would satisfy your question.
Yeah, yes, I agree with you. It's not a criticism. I'm just saying maybe it just needs to be tightened up a
No,
little.
councillor, it's a very good point.
Just like Blackjack does it from the depot up there. He's always on the ball.
Yep.
The second one, Mr. Mayor, is page 93. About some emerging issues. And it's stronger country communities round 3, applications made for Drake Hall, Steinbrook and Sunnyside Hall. I just wonder, is anything we've heard about those yet?
CE has got
The
a
application
report.
was put in about 3 months ago.
Yeah, councillor.
Yeah, through Mr Mayor, I rang Janelle Saffin's office on, I think it might have been even Monday, if not Tuesday. Her communications manager, Ronnie, and I can't remember his surname, rang me back almost immediately. Janelle took it up in Macquarie Street and said that there will not be an announcement on Stronger Country Communities Funds Mark III until January or February at the earliest, which is going to mean it's going to make it a little bit difficult for council, because the Drought Communities Extension funding has got to be worked out pretty well next month. There's fixing country roads. There's about half a dozen different funding applications or grant applications that have got to go in, and yet we don't know what will be approved and not approved in the ones that are already in with the Stronger Country Communities Fund. So it's going to make it really difficult, particularly with the Drought Communities Extension Program, the $1 million from the feds, because there's a lot of overlap between what was asked for in the Stronger Country Communities Funds, which we may or may not get, and what we may or may want to put in under the Drought Communities funding.
Do you have more, councillor?
Yes, just one more, Mr Mayor, if I can just
That's
find
fine.
it here somewhere. I just following, shit, just following
Recorded too, councillor.
Just following on from our workshop yesterday, and I was really, I didn't bring it up yesterday, but I was very pleased to hear Mark say that there's a strong possibility the sales are going to go back till 8 or 9 o'clock on the Monday morning. Just years ago, when we always had bullocks, I've got my own scales, and we'd weigh the cattle, and one particular sale, it was a very hot day, our agent came third, and they weren't weighed till 5 o'clock, and we lost 11%.
Yeah.
I've heard of other guys losing 13%. Now, our country's only 2 kilometres to the south of town.
Yep.
We got them in at 5, and then the truck by our pass, but the people in the Rocky and Mingoola, they probably got their cattle in early in the morning, and they were probably there 36 hours, some of them, before they were weighed. And I think there was always a deterrent towards going to the Tenterfield sale because of that very reason.
You're referring to your curfew time, councillor?
Sorry?
You're referring to the curfew?
Yeah, the curfew.
Yeah.
Oh, no, not so much the curfew is always about 7 o'clock,
Yeah.
but it's...
But the time they had to be there is the time they were sold?
Yeah, the curfew was 7, and then the sale started at 1.
Yep.
If your agent was third, it might be 4 or 5 o'clock they were sold, and then wait about 6 o'clock.
And councillor, I can add to that, plus, and it's been proved that the cattle do lose weight while they're on the transport of that, getting there.
Yeah.
Not from you, you could walk them the town.
Yeah, that's right.
But different to councillor Petrie with the country down the rock, it's a
So
different setup.
that may help council's numbers at the sale yards here.
Thank you for noting that. Okay, councillor, we're dealing with the monthly operation report. Councillor to the CEO of senior staff. Councillor Bronwyn.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Further with the sale yards, I see that on page 74, it's still got repricing of loading ramp and double height save system. We approved that as a separate item some months ago. I'm just wondering on progress on the under and over ramp. Sorry? Oh, good,
At the
right.
workshop.
And then I had one about the grader.
About?
The grader.
Is there a page, councillor?
Yes, there is a page. That would be page 117.
117.
I
So
just
what
see
was your
that-
question to do
I
with-
see that the central graders going Black Swamp, Bryans Gap Road and Timbarra Road.
Yeah.
Had complaints from Timbarra Road residents previously with grading from town out, rather than going to the end and coming back, going from clean to dirty. Because it's just taking weeds out. So just keep asking, and I know previously that's been reiterated at the time, but I just think people maybe keep needing to be reminded to take a clean grader out and bring it back in towards the other.
So what you're referring to, start at the other end?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you want to comment, councillor? Councillor, Mr CEO?
Yeah, look, Fiona I don't know whether the Director of Infrastructure was here when this last came up, so it's a very good idea to bring it up. And what Councillor Petrie's talking about, for those that don't know, is the transfer of seeds that would grow weeds. So if we start from the furthest point away on Timbarra Road, there's less chance, well actually there's no chance, because the grader's going the other direction, and work back towards town. The weeds that are more prevalent closer to town can't get transferred further down the road.
Fiona, did you want some comment on that, please?
No, I'm willing to take it on board. It's no
Yeah.
issue with me.
Yeah.
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah. All good? I'm sorry.
So just, the under and over ramp, they're still, when I say that, we are still designing the ramp, and I don't think we've gone out to get quotes at this point in time, just with the volumes of work. We are planning on doing it before the end of the financial year. It goes, you quite rightly, it's in this budget. It's just trying to slot that in with some of the other stuff we've got going on.
I'm sorry, what's the delay? I don't understand.
The delay, I guess, is the volume of projects and the number of people to run them at this point in time. So the more projects we've got, the more grants that David Council's working on to get us more money in the future, the less of his time has actually been allocated to undertake those projects that we'd like to see happen at this point in time. And that's what we're trying to juggle at the moment, is trying to get the best bang for bang for our time.
Yep. And this was discussed, Councillor, at length at the SARIAD meeting the other day.
So there's
to do with
nothing
the rent.
untoward with this, we're just
No.
running out of people, and it's the same as what we talked about before. We've got 6 grant applications open. Fiona and I had a meeting on Friday. They're closed on the 10th of December, the 11th of December, the 19th of December, and we're just getting pushed backwards with some of those expectations. And what we're trying to get, even from council with some of the other items we've discussed, is a good idea of what you're prioritising, because at the moment we've got all of these projects that we want funded and we're putting in the funds for noise, but we don't have a lot of people. You know, we've still only got the David councils and so on to go forth and do those applications, which are time consuming, similar to trying to price stuff.
I thought it was reasonably simple to decide where you're going to buy the loading ramp from. I mean, the under-and-over ramp is more important than the other heighty thing, which half the truckies don't use, and particularly before the Weiner sales, is so that you can get those trucks in and get those trucks out. So, I mean, isn't it a case of just purchasing the item and then getting the concrete work and sticking the thing in, or...?
That's more of a conversation from David. I would be lying to you if I said I knew all of the ins and outs of actually the installation of that. I can obviously get a response from David if that's what we'd need. Alternatively, I can take on board. I guess we were working to a time frame of June 30 for all of our projects, unless there's a different conversation. So if you want us to move that forward, or I've got a specific date in mind as the completion date, not the 30th of June, then we probably need to know that so that we can try and manage our resources appropriately.
Councillor, just bear with me. I do note your comment, and it is relevant to do with that time frame in that late February, March period with the sales, and we all know that it's a busy time. So I do note that that's a very important time of the year, and if we head for a goal of then, well, that does indicate a time when we'd hope to have that project, I'm mainly talking about the loading ramp, to have it completed. So it is an important thing you've said. All right? Did you have any other questions, Councillor? Any other questions, Councillor, to do with the monthly report? Councillor Vera, apologise.
Just through you, Mr Mayor, to the engineer, and a comment to Councillor Petrie when she mentioned about the weeds. One of the engineers, when they stood up our way, he stood for council about 20 years ago, he was going to install a device on the graders to prevent weed spread, and he called it a judder bar or some name like that. I'm just wondering if you knew anything about...
What did you call a jar bar?
Judder bar.
Judder?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was one of his platforms he's still on council for, and he got...
Did he get elected?
Well, he missed out by 1 or 2 votes.
Fair dinkum.
Yes. Yeah.
What's his name, Councillor? No, don't mention his name. We'll get sued.
And I'm sorry, I've never heard of one. Okay.
You want any comment, Fiona?
I've never heard of it.
Okay. I'll just hang on, Councillor McDish. We're dealing with the monthly report. Councillors, any other questions to our CE or senior staff? Councillor McDish?
I think he was of Italian origin.
Okay. Righto, we'll leave that one there. Righto. Okay, councillors, the monthly report's there. All happy to accept the officer's recommendation? All in favour? Against? Carried. Page 62, councillors. Item GAV 73/19, Tennille Shire Council Annual Report. Can I move in a second ahead to do with this, please? Councillor Murray, thank you. He's moved it. Seconded by Councillor Rogan, and I thank you. And I'll hand over to our Manager of Customs Service and Governance and Records. Eric, it's great to have you back. Waiting patiently in the wings.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through you, Mr Mayor. Purpose of this report is for Council to receive the annual report inclusive of the annual financial statements for the financial year ending 30 June 2019. Council must prepare an annual report in accordance with the Local Government Act within 5 months of the end of the financial year. The annual report must contain at least the copy of the Council's audited financial reports prepared in accordance with the Local Government Code of Accounting Practice and Financial Reporting, and other information and material as required under the regulations and the Act. A copy of the Council's annual report must be posted on the Council's website. We must provide a copy to the Minister for Local Government and other such persons or bodies as required under the Act. and under the regulations. The annual report consists of several sections commencing with the Mayor's and the General Manager's messages, followed by statistics about the Shire, our achievements over the year against community strategic plan directions, and statutory reporting items. I commend the report to councillors.
Thank you, Erica. Any questions to Erica to do with the report? No questions? Councillors, I just have a quick comment, and it's a bit round. To do with our CE's message, and I commend him on the area he's covered there. In the second last paragraph, in an area that we've been dealing in this area in the last 12 months, I thank and commend the CE for noting that and mentioning the work that needs to be done with our Indigenous people in our Shire to do with cultural burning. Councillor Petrie, I thank you and commend you on attending that the other afternoon with Victor. And I apologise I only got there to the end of it. But what I want to do, share with you councillors, is hopefully that, speaking to Nolene, coming from that we wish to frame this and put this in our foyer, because it is supportive of the cultural burns and it is referred to this area. So I'm just sharing that with you because it's something that we need to keep driving to work with the devastation that this area's received, and that we work with our Aboriginal community about cool burning and culture burning, and it's something that we'd like to drive through this council. But there'll be more about that later. But what?
They're doing one, Mombaland are doing one for this area. That's
Children.
that one's done slightly further south. So sorry, Mr. Mayor. Before you arrived at the meeting the other day, the Mombaland community and asking local landowners and everyone to do a similar thing specifically for here, because that's come from further south. Right. Still on the tablelands, but each area is slightly different, and so they're asking people to take photos of what's flowering at different times, etc., so we can develop exactly that for here. So perhaps before you frame it, you'd actually
well, if we don't frame this, we'll frame the new one.
Frame the new one, yeah.
This to do with the Rocky also.
Yeah. Well, we might need a couple. So.
Well, we do too.
We do.
But anyway, but I did show Helen Giro, who runs the Mooreland office. She was very pleased to see that paragraph. So I do thank you, Terry, for having that in there. Yeah.
As part of this, I just wanted to comment on the State of the Environment report. Is that now as part of this?
Yep.
There's just page 3 of the.
So it's Appendix 2, everyone.
Yeah, Appendix 2. On bottom of page 3 it says biodiversity planning and management does not appear to be considered a high priority to council, which I find an extraordinary statement. And then above that, fourth dot point down, it says there was an ongoing decrease in investment in natural resource management activities and no new protected areas declared in the Shire. So I don't think the writer of this will be very happy about that other motion that went through today. So I just am a bit gobsmacked by some of the comments. If you then refer on to page 28,
Yeah,
Scott.
Just bear with us, councillor.
I got the first one, Councillor Bronwyn Petrie, about the biodiversity. What was the second one?
just above that about, says there was an ongoing decrease in investment and no new protected areas.
Yeah, no new protected areas.
Yeah.
Declared in the
Thank
Shire.
you.
Yeah, but that's a true comment, isn't it?
No, but the bit about ongoing decrease in investment in natural resource management activities, by whom?
Right.
Decrease by whom? Like,
Right.
that's a pretty broad statement. And I really object to the statement about biodiversity planning and management does not appear to be considered a high priority to council.
No, councillor.
Then on page 28,
The same document, councillor?
same document, yep. Under challenges and areas.
Yep.
It's got continuing decrease investment in biodiversity and natural resource management projects from most levels of government. The state government has put in an unprecedented amount going into the Biodiversity Conservation Trust, etc., with the new legislation in 2016. So I'm not sure where the person who wrote this has been researching. And the next dot point about a possible increase in vegetation clearing due to new land clearing laws. Well, depends on what type of clearing we're talking about. If we're talking about older regrowth, if we're talking about whatever, but I suggest they have a very good look at the codes encapsulated in those two acts. And then I just wanted to query this. None of the biodiversity recommendations of the Comprehensive State of the Environment 2012-16 have been implemented by this writer. I was just wondering what the recommendations were. But if they're of, I just consider this, once again, to be an unsatisfactory document, and I can't even spell Mount Lindsay, so there you go. I know what the person is paid, but I wouldn't be paying it.
Any comment from senior staff or Mr CE?
Unfortunately, I'll plead the fifth on this one. I had them lined up to give a presentation to the entire council prior to this. And unfortunately, once again, with the timing and the volume of stuff that council's considered, it's been very challenging to get people in the room. Nolene is not accepting a lot of my calls, and that's a lie, for extra workshops based on your workload and the information that you're providing her. Just to be clear, that the writer of the report, so I'll take responsibility for all of the contents of the report, and we all view things differently, and I have been through that. The writer of the report is on a contract to council. It's not an external body saying that they're doing something, that contractor or Melaleuca Enterprises were engaged for the 4 years of this delivery plan to provide updates to the environmental report to ensure that, I guess, we got some level of continuity and didn't have to spend all of that time and money going back to explain some of these things. The other ones, and we've talked a little bit about it last year even with perceptions, the other one in there is that she does come every year and she consults broadly across the staff, and we talk a little bit about communications, and some of these things, you're quite right, require further background, so I'm happy to provide responses to council's questions about that. But I guess one of those concerns is how people perceive it based on their background and their readings of it. So I've read the report, which I'm going to say, and I didn't actually have an issue. I can understand, once you've explained it, those issues that you see and how you interpret it. So I'm happy to provide a response, and it's a shame. Once again, I probably should have done more about that to make sure that we did actually have a workshop with council so that we could dig into the nitty-gritty prior to getting the updated version to you.
I mean, I certainly agree that there is continuity.
Any more questions, councillors, to do with the report? No? Sorry, Councillor Very, yes?
Just a comment on the section Bonham was talking about, Councillor Petrie was talking about. Tenterfield was noted to have the second cleanest air in the world, although it might have slipped in the last few months. But that should be mentioned in there as well. That was done by a research group in... Was it?
There's no evidence to back that up.
There was, Brian. Somebody followed that through, and it was somebody in Sweden or something followed that through, or Switzerland or something.
Yeah, I got from, he was the representative.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Councillors, the monthly operational, sorry. Annual, I apologise, annual report. Moved on. The annual report, councillors, I was reading the other page. Right, the officer's recommendations, they're all happy to receive a note. In favour, against, carried. Right, councillors, page 64 in your hard copy. It's item GAV 74/19, presentation of financial statements for the year ended 30th of June 2019. Can I move in a second here, please? Councillor Very, thank you. Seconded. Councillor Mike Petrie, thank you. And we'll welcome our Manager of Finance and Technology, Mr Paul Della. Welcome, Mr Della.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And through you, I think from the presentation that Mr Jeff Allen gave this morning, you've all got a fairly clear understanding of the financial statements and the position that we're in, and I don't know that I need to add anything too much further to that. I need to pass on my thanks to Igor for the work that he did, and the finance team generally on this. Accounting's a funny beast sometimes. The accounting standards, they change quite often, and there's different interpretations and so on. And I was looking at Glen Innes' financial statements yesterday and noted, I think I mentioned when I presented the draft statements to you, that their draft statements were showing a fairly significant loss due to their treatment of how they dispose of some of their assets, the road assets. And I indicated at the time that if we had to do this, account for it in the same way, then, you know, we could be looking down to the same situation. But thanks to, in large part to Igor and the work that he did on preparing a paper on around that, the Audit Office accepted how we treated with our disposal of assets and agreed with our proposal. And as a result of that, we saw a positive result. Thanks to Igor for the work that he did on that, and so on. As a result of that, I note that there was a finance conference held recently that unfortunately I couldn't get to because of the fires, but Igor did manage to get to that. And one of the things that came out of that was a joint organisation, the New England Joint Organisational Council decided to get together with the finance staff, I think in February, to bring people together to discuss some of these issues, to get some common understanding of some of these things. And I think that will be good for the whole sector, the whole region and the whole local government going forward, if we get people in the room to talk about some of these things. So that'll be great to get some consistency across the councils. So yes, once again, as Jeff mentioned this morning, a good result. But I guess coming back to some of the discussions earlier today, you know, on the one hand we've had a petition calling for a cap on charges and fees. On the other hand, we've seen a request for some additional expenditure on council for supporting local businesses in town. There's a number of other cost pressures that we're faced with at the moment. You're all aware of water, sale yards, truck wash, a range of different matters. So that's why it is important that perspective, I believe we do consider these things in a whole, from a whole perspective, not just looking at individual items, and that's why I think it's important that they be discussed as part of the budget process. But getting back to this, yes, I recommend this recommendation to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Any questions to Paul to do with the annual financial statements? Councillor McNish.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Paul, I'm no accountant, but I mean, looks to me there like, okay, we made 20 million, we spent 10, we made 10 profit. That's obviously not right, but I know that things like depreciation, that sort of factor in, but Mr. Public out there will see that result if they're keen enough to look at it and say, gee, they made all that money, why are they putting their rates up? Why are they putting the fees and charges up? But I don't know how we could explain it a little bit more. Obviously, that would, things like depreciation, all that would come into it, I should imagine. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The important figure to note there is not that net operating result, but the figure beneath it, which is the net operating result for the year before grants and contributions provided for capital purposes. So that 831,000, that's the real result for the year, because the top line figure includes all the grants that we receive for capital purchases for bridges and so on. The expenditure for that doesn't show in the operating statement. It's part of capital and asset purchases. So, it's important to concentrate on that figure there, the 831.
Other questions to Paul to do with the report, councillors? The report's there, councillors, to receive and note. All in favour? Again, carried. Page 71, your hard copy, councillors, GOV 75/19, quarterly budget review statement, September 2019. Can I have a move and a second here, please? Councillor Murray, thank you. Second, please. Councillor Michael Petrie, thank you. Once again, I'll hand over to Paul to present this report.
Thanks again, through you again, Mr. Mayor. The quarterly budget review, first quarterly budget review brings in carry forwards from last financial year. I'll just briefly discuss some of the key things in the income and expenditure review. As far as the income goes, by far the biggest area of change is in the transport area, where we've brought in some of the NDRRA grants and contributions that have been recognised, as well as some of the funding that council has received for bridges, so that's led to an increase in income there. Some of the other major changes in income reflect the stronger country community grant income that we received, and they're reflected in the planning, regulation, building and amenities and parks and gardens and open spaces service areas of council. The Waste Management Service area received additional grant income for the Torrington Transfer Station construction and Bunnavanoo landfill environmental improvements. And at this stage, we've also taken out anything to do with the truck wash income and expense until that gets resolved. On the expenditure side of things, we've taken out some of the RFS costs because initially we put them as capital, and they should be, sorry, we added them in because they should have been treated as expense, not capital. And we also had carry forward of grants, so expenditures increased accordingly where we've increased the income along those lines. The net effect of all of that is in our forecast surplus of about 909,000, slightly less than what we had predicted originally, but still compared to the 831,000 this year, anticipating a reasonable result at this stage. So that's just in terms of the operating income expenditure statement. As I mentioned, we brought in a range of carry forwards for grants that were unexpended as at the 30th of June 2019, and basically they're all listed on page 79. There's a whole range of things there, and just some movements between things. So we brought across some carry forwards for risk management software, workforce planning and evaluation software, the Mingoola Rural Fire Service Station. We've moved some stuff away from capital to operating. The grants, as I mentioned, the Stronger Country Community Grant money. So there's a range of different grants. There's mainly grant money and carry forwards from last year that are showing in there. Then we just have our cash position as at 30th of September, amount we spent on consultancies and legal fees, and then a list of some of the major contracts that were entered into for that period. Once again, showing Council's forecast a reasonable result for this coming year. And yes, we'll have a few more reviews throughout the year, and we'll see how things progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I do need to note on page 73 to do the report with the increase in capital work expenditure, I mean a $7 million increase, and that's just goes to show with the grant funding and the work we've got ahead of us to do with the roads and bridges and the plant renewal expenditure and Stronger Community Grant expenditure. It really puts us in good position. I mean, we're as busy as hell, but doing a lot of really, you know, it's about infrastructure, and that, I can see that, you know.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. It is about infrastructure. It is about these grants. Can be double-edged sword, of course, so with grants, because if we get capital grants for new projects, and it can lead to additional depreciation costs and so on. But by and large, it's a great thing to be getting these grants in.
Yep.
So yes.
Yep. Thank you. Questions to Paul, councillors, to do with the report? Reports there. All happy to adopt? Again, carried. Bear with me. Page 84, councillors. It's item GOV 7619, Finance and Accounts, period ending the 31st of October 2019. Moving to seconder here, please. Councillor Sawyer, thank you. Seconder, please. Councillor Brodmann-Petrie, thank you. And once again, I hand over to Paul.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and through you again. This is the usual monthly finance report. It shows that the council had $4.363 million in its general fund, general bank account as at the 31st of October, and $313,000 in the trust account, together with an amount of $14.360 million invested. I'll also note that for the month of October, there were no concessions granted under Council's concealed water leakage policy.
Good. No water getting away. Questions to our Manager of Finance to do with the report, councillors? No? Reports there, all happy to receive and note. In favour? Again, carried. Beautiful. Page 87, councillors, is item GOV 77/19, capital expenditure report as of the 31st of October. Moving to seconder here, please. Councillor Sawyer, I'll go with you again, seconded by Councillor Rogan, and I thank you. Once again, over to you, Paul.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. For you again. The report there, noted in the report that there's no significant variances at this stage of the financial year. I've had to take it.
Questions to board, councillors? All in favour to receive and note the report? Thank you. Councillors, we know we've done with on page 89 with our first notice of motion. We've dealt with that one, and thanks to councillors for the support in moving that forward. Councillors, move on to page 91. Second notice of motion, it's item NM8/19. Councillor Peters, being the author, do you wish to move that?
Yeah, I do.
Just switch your microphone, councillor, please. Can I have a seconder, please? I'll go with you, councillor Bowman, thank you. And councillor Peters, being the author of the report, over to you to present it. With the motion, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Anytime soon, councillor, be good.
Yeah, I'm just...
You take your time, Tom.
Yeah, taking my time. Yeah, the council requests the New South Wales Government to investigate the reintroduction of grazing permits in national park, forestry, wilderness areas to reduce the fuel load, undergrowth, in brackets. The reason for that is protect human life and infrastructure, protect native fauna and flora. And that's about it.
Councillor Bowman, being the seconder, did you wish to speak to the motion?
Yes, certainly, Mr Mayor. So he was in shock because he actually remembered to put it on.
He's right.
The only suggestion I'd have is change forestry wilderness just to state forest. So it would read in national parks and state forest areas.
Yep.
So the thing is, as we've seen, where there's been high fuel loads, the fires have been far more intense and have spread more rapidly, causing huge devastation, not just to assets such as buildings, people's, and of course people's lives, buildings, fencing, stock, etc., but total devastation, especially in springtime, to our little birds, animals, etc., that normally shelter in the trees. All the other animals that go underground, well, the ground's been totally baked, scorched, sterilised, there's no seed bank left there. It's going to take decades for some areas to recover until the soils come back on and seed sources re-establish. Part of the issue is that our forests are becoming bottom heavy instead of top heavy. So instead of having a lower understory, we're now getting that monoculture of weed, wattle, invasive natives that come through and create that massive amount of understory that, in the next few years will grow up and once again be there ready to put the fires back up into the crowns of the trees. So it's a combination. This is one part of reducing the fuel load, but it's certainly an important part, and I support it fully.
Thanks, councillors. Councillor Very.
Actually, I'd like to speak a bit to it, then I'd like to move an amendment.
Happy to do with that, councillor?
Yeah. I rent one of these state forest areas. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to put stock on it for ages. There's no water on it. It's 600 acres of scrub, as Tom calls it, wilderness, if you want to call it wilderness, because that's about all it is. To fence it's going to cost me about $20,000. All the fences have been destroyed in fires previously, and I think that if we wish to stick this motion up, I think it should be that the state government allow something like a 30-metre fire break along the fence lines.
Councillor, is that your amendment you're referring to?
Yeah.
Okay. So what we'll do is you wish to put that in the recommendation?
Yeah.
Okay. The Council requests New South Wales Government to investigate the reintroduction of grazing permits in national parks. I've already made a change to the second, Councillor Bowman, national parks and state forest areas, so that's what you wanted in there, Councillor? You want to move it? So Tom, you're happy with that?
Yep.
Right? In order to reduce the fuel load and undergrowth. So Councillor, do you wish to start another sentence with what you want to do? And?
Yes. And that fences, along the fence line, we should have a 30-metre fire break.
Fence line of what? National parks and forestry?
Yes, definitely.
Both sides?
Yeah.
Buffer?
Yeah.
Question, yeah, course you can.
Thanks, Councillor Bear. We've already got an existing motion on the books about...
Yes, we have.
About installing
To do with
fire breaks.
Curry's Gap, yeah?
No, not just Curry's, but
Okay.
no, this was to do with after the other fires, where we have pushed for water infrastructure
That's right.
inside the parks, internal fire trails
Yep.
and external fire breaks.
Yep.
The other issue here is national parks do edge burning, a lot of, they call it asset protection burning. All the control on the edges is never going to stop high fuel loads in the centre, because they then spot kilometres over the top. So yes, a 30-metre fire break is important, but it's not as important as reducing the internal fuel load. So we've already covered the external fire break in our previous council motion that actually went to the local government conference. So it's redundant, I'm sorry.
It's referring to when a permit holder is allowed to fence the area. That's all I was referring to.
Well, councillor, you're quite entitled to if the move and the second are happy with it, and that a 30-metre fire break be constructed around the fence lines. But councillor Bronwyn, you're correct with that motion, and it has mentioned to do with the fire breaks and the watering points in that motion that we've had there for some time. So it's up to the move and I'm sorry.
Sorry, councillor Berry just said that the people should be able to put a fence around it. Yeah, absolutely, that's a different thing, but it's...
Put a fence around what?
The park, if they're going to be leasing it.
If you wish to have a grazing permit over a state forest, you should be allowed to build a 30-metre fire break and put your fence along that fire break.
Yeah, to be protective of that area.
Yes.
Yeah, especially where you got in a perfect world, you got the cattle in there.
Yeah.
Right.
So I know we've done the other one, but this is just for those people that get the...
I'll just go to CE for some comment.
Mr Mayor.
Still dealing with I'll get there.
For councillor Very, would it be covered by, and the council refer, and reference be made to X, whatever the number is, motion, so that the entirety of the previous motion with, the watering and the fire breaks and the fire trials, and everything was all included without having to actually put it in that motion.
So you're referring to the motion we took to the New South Wales local government? Yep.
That would cover it.
Yep.
Except for, I suppose, areas that are already under permit. I'm not too sure whether they'd cover that or not.
Right. Anyway, it is an add-on to the recommendation. I'm going to use it. The councillors, hang on, councillor. The councillor's quite entitled to move it as an amendment. Do I have a seconder? Well, it's lost you to the lack of a seconder, councillor. Yep.
Could I suggest, the wording should be that that these lands, they should be fenced anyway to keep all the feral animals out. So anyway, we could have a sentence there that says that these lands should be fenced with adequate clearing, with an adequate fence line clearing, rather than stipulating 30 metres. I'd like to see you put a 30-metre clearing on some of the hills here, but so after undergrowth, you could just have comma, and without necessarily saying who's doing the fencing, just say, with fencing, with boundary fencing constructed, or something like that. Because some of them already have boundary fencing, so it's just getting a bit messy. That's
that's what I'm trying to resolve here, councillor. Go back on, trying to work with it, councillor Sawyer. So the councillor's quite entitled to the amendments lost. I was referring to it as an amendment that councillor Vera was moving. So councillor Petrie, as Bronwyn Petrie, is the seconder of the notice of motion. You're trying to work with the councillor to put something in there. I think that. Well, it's up to the mover and the seconder that you'd like to leave it as it is. We've made the one change in there to do with wilderness, all right? So that change has been made, and that's noted. So I think we'll deal with the recommendation, okay? And our CE's made the comment, and I fully support him, and that motion is, and we need to keep pursuing that, councillor. Very, and hopefully that we'll get somewhere with that. So, okay, is there any more comment to do with this recommendation? So be aware that the recommendation is as is with the one word change. So it is, all unhappy with the recommendation? Against? Carried. Thank you. We nearly got, you should have met before we got here, councillors. Righto, councillors, page 93, item RES 10/19, council resolution registered November 2019. Can I move in second here, please? Councillor Murray, thank you, seconded by Councillor Sawyer, and I thank you. And I'll hand over to our CE.
Through you, Mr Mayor, happy to take questions by exception.
Questions to do with our, with the council resolution registered, councillors? To our CE? No? The officers, I apologise. Councillor Verity, I apologise, mate.
On page 29, I note that we did it a fair while ago, knocked Councillor Petrie's request for a siren in the town.
Yep.
Just a comment there that Crow's Nest have actually just installed sirens for a fire, and they're a different sounding siren altogether.
I did read that somewhere.
Yeah, it was on our local news, and they did sound the siren, they're a weird sounding siren, so it may be worth looking at again.
Thank you for noting that, councillor. Any other questions to the CE to do with the council resolution register? No? The officer's recommendation there, councillors, all happy to receive a note? Against? Carried. Councillors, can I have a motion to go into confidential, please? Councillor Murray, seconded by Councillor Rogan. No, thank you. All in favour? Against? Carried. Chair, right, no?
With the confidentiality